We're talking today with Tim Newman of Amherst, New York. And the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, now Tim, can you start us with some background? And to begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born February 25th, 1948, Buffalo, New York, on the Lower East Side.
All right.
Lived in a two-room apartment for a while before my father decided to move into a two-family house with 3 rooms instead of 2 rooms.
Mm-hmm.
And grew up on the Polish east side of Buffalo. Went to a Catholic grade school. Went through a public high school, which was a culture shock for me because it was the first time I intermingled with inner city kids of the African American.
Which high school did you go to?
Emerson Vocational High School. It took up drafting and tool design. I was with the idea that eventually I would open up my own little drafting shop and go into business for myself. But prior to that, I also wanted to be a professional basketball player. But 2 things were against me: talent and height. So that put a kibosh on everything, and I fortunately didn't take my academics as seriously as I should because I figured I was going to be the athlete of the city.
Did you play basketball in high school?
I played basketball JV.
Okay.
That's the highest I ever went. And then I was a team manager for a while just to be involved into the basketball program. But I ran cross country and track. Did fairly well for an average runner. It's some good times, some bad times, like everything else. It was a good experience. Went to a business school called Bryan and Stratton at that time. It was not a accredited school. It was just a regular business school. And with 2 months left, I got drafted. And I said, well, hey, I'm going to school. I shouldn't be drafted. And he says, well, it's not an accredited school. It's a business school. So there lie runs the rub, the semantics, saying that you're not a certified student. You're just a business student. So I got drafted.
Okay. Now, when did you get the draft notice?
I got my draft notice when I was at home. I came home from school, and my mother says, you've got a letter. And I opened it up, and I figured I knew what it was, and it was my drafting papers. And scared, and well, scared isn't a word. Knew it was coming.
Okay. What did you know about Vietnam at that point?
Not much. I lived myself into a sports world. I never read world events at that time. I heard of it on the news and stuff, but didn't really comprehend that this could be something I'd ever get involved into because we're talking late 60s at that time, 62, 63 when it started. And it was a blip. It wasn't a major thing at that time as far as Vietnam was concerned. It was just another small country someplace that we're trying not to get involved into, but we are involved into. So I really found out about Vietnam once I got into the service, when I got into basic. And they were training us for this.
And when did you report for basic?
I reported, and this is really cool because I reported on October 6th, 1969. I met my wife when I came out of school, or out of the service. I proposed to her and we got married on October 6th. And I got discharged on October 6th. So some people say that's a good date and some people say it's a bad date. You know, but it makes it easier remembering the anniversary because it's on the day I got drafted.
Okay. And how old were you at the time you went in?
I was 20 at the time when I went in.
Okay. Now, had you already gone through the physical and that kind of thing before that, or did you do that once you showed up?
We do that once you get showed up. Once you get your draft notice and they take you report to the board, then they give you the physical, and which is superficial because no matter what you tell them, you're fine. If there's any problems, they used to put you in for 24 hours in case any medication that you're taking to show up any kind of signs or anything. We go through your system, and then they would give you the physical again and give you the stamp and out you go.
Were there many people who were trying to beat the system at that point?
Yes. And at that time I couldn't understand it because not being familiar with the situation. But there were guys that were friends that I knew at that time that were thinking of going to Canada. And at one time I thought I was going to, I wanted to do that to get after I found out more what was going on. But then tradition took place. My father was a Marine in the South Pacific. His father was in World War II. His father before him was in World War I. So it's a family type of thing. And I really didn't want to go, I mean, to Canada. I felt this was my obligation. I'm a U.S. citizen. At that time, it's a duty that you have to do. It's part of growing up. And hopefully it's not during a wartime and you're going to survive the thing, but it's still part of family tradition or of the United States. You're a U.S. citizen. This is your country. They tell you you have to do this. This is what you're going to do. Naive as it may sound, this is what I still believe in today.
Right.
So I went to Fort Dix, New Jersey, and again another cultural shock because the first thing I saw was a 5'8" black drill sergeant yelling and screaming in my face that I hadn't even gotten off of the bus yet. So that was another cultural shock. But the training that we got there and the discipline is amazing.
Okay. Talk a little bit about the process. You arrive, you get greeted by the shouting sergeant.
Yeah.
What do they do with you in the next few days?
Well, in the next few days, well, prior to that, we were going from New Jersey, from Buffalo to New Jersey. We take a flight, and they put us on buses. And we went through the town, and this is at night. We haven't even slept. We left at 6 in the evening. We get there, and we're just going through processing. I mean, they just give you a military jacket, overcoat, ball cap, and that's how you still have your civilian clothes and stuff like that. So you're going through this, and you're standing in this big auditorium, and you've got them lined up against the wall, and they're telling you the do's and the don'ts of what's going to be happening in the process and stuff like that. Then you go to your barracks, and then in this case, we went to our barracks, and we came out the next day still in our civilian clothes because they haven't issued us uniforms yet. So they made us empty out all our suitcases. Took all what they consider contraband, which was books and clothing and underwear and anything else that you had. So basically, they just took your suitcase, emptied it, put it into the box, you signed it, and out it went back home. Then they marched you up into to the other barracks where you get processed again. You get another medical, physical. Then they give you your clothing, and they keep punching it out on you, and then you go to the barracks, and that's when it all starts. Your training. And at this time, we still haven't slept. It's been almost 24 hours, and it's just a constant motion going on and on and on. And then they gave us 2 hours sleep, and then training started. And as dumb as this may sound, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Outside of Vietnam, it was an experience where they take you down. They make you feel like as if you're nothing, and then they build you up. And they give you the confidence that you can do certain things that you never felt that you could do before. It made me a better person, made me grow up faster than I thought I would be. Actually, Vietnam made me grow up faster than I really wanted to be. And but you hear the people complain about basic training, all the liberals and stuff like that it's too harsh. But what they make you do is to react instead of ask questions. Because later on, when you are in a war situation, if you think you're dead, if you react, you have a better chance of surviving. And you're hearing orders and you're obeying them. Right or wrong at the time, but you're reacting to that situation that you are, and that saves a lot of lives. So the training is good. It has to be. It has to be tough. Because if you're in a war zone, you're no longer being pampered, and the enemy doesn't care what your background is. From basic, we go to advanced training.
Let's fill out a few more parts of this, because the experience that you have is the one that's now unfamiliar to a very, very large chunk of the American population.
Right.
In terms of the breaking down part, how does that work?
Call you names. I mean, they really, you get this look on your face, why are you picking on me, But they make you do things that you didn't feel you do. You're crawling through mud for basic training. They're showing you how to be an infantryman. Regardless of your MOS, you go through basic.
Right.
You have to learn how to fire a weapon. You have to know how to throw a grenade. You have to know everything that's military before they look at your test that you take beforehand, where you fill out all your applications and your education, where they try and book you into where you would be most applicably suitable for the service, whether it be logistics or whether it be in a cook or clerical, whatever, you know. I put down when I was in business school, I took typing and, you know, and took a little bit of computers at that time, and they said, well, we'll give you another test, see if you can become a typist, you know. So I went for the type and I failed it miserably. I mean, I was so nervous, I was pecking away, and I made more mistakes than I and everything. So they said, no, you ain't gonna go there, you're gonna stay here.
All right. And how much emphasis was there on discipline? When the
A lot.
Yeah.
There is a lot of discipline because you're looking not only to build yourself, but confidence in yourself, I should say, but confidence in the people you're working with or you're going to be with. And there has to be a trust among the group because you're going to be depending on each one of them for your life. They're depending on you, you're going to be depending on them. Though you don't think about it at that time in basic. You just think it's a bunch of bullshit, you know, basically is what you're thinking it's going to be. You don't realize it's like when you're growing up, when you're a little kid and your parents are telling you you're doing this or you're going to, you know, down the road, this, you're going to understand this. The light clicks on, you know, down the road. A lot of physical training, a lot of hurry up and wait. That's part of the discipline. I mean, you're talking New Jersey, Fort Dix, November. You got the wind coming off the river, and you're standing out there in just fatigues. No overcoat, no hat, no earmuffs, just fatigues, waiting for PT. And so you're getting up at 3 in the morning. By 3:30, you have to, I'm going to say this anyway, shit, shower, and shave. You have to get everything done within 15 minutes and eat in 15 minutes to be standing out at 3:30 in the morning on the field, on the PT field, waiting for your drill sergeant to come out and put you through PT. 45 minutes later, he comes out, white t-shirt, his fatigue pants, spit polished boots, short haircut, standing up on top of a platform, and we're all lined up and we're doing our PT. And it's like 30 degrees, 20 degrees, and we're just shivering. And I'll tell you, we had a drill sergeant, African American, same guy that greeted us onto the bus. He was an animal. He would do PT push-ups one-handed, you know, one arm going up and down, going into the prone position, yelling and screaming and not even wavering up over there. We're looking at holy. He said, "You're going to be like me by the time this is true." We're like, no, we ain't. But able to start doing push-ups, sit-ups, doing our running or PT to get us into the best physical shape that we can. I went into the service at 128 pounds. I came out 170.
All right. Now, how easy or hard, or how long did it take you to kind of figure out the system and adjust to being in the Army?
If you were smart, it took you 2 weeks. If you weren't smart and you bucked the system, you never had it easy. The more you complained, the more you resisted, the harder it got. And rightly so, because it's part of the breaking down process. Some of them would get physical, and those were the ones that they would put into the brigade. They thought if they got physical, they would get discharged, dishonorably. It don't work that way. You're still in the Army for as long as you're going to be, whether you're drafted or enlisted, but you're going to be in jail for the most of the time. And so either you do what they say and have a chance of not going anywhere but your MOS, or go to jail for the rest of your tour, you know, which is not fun either because it's worse conditions as far as PT and doing stuff than what you're doing now.
Now, what sort of people were training alongside you at that point? Were they mostly 19-year-olds? Or?
Yeah, a lot of them were 18, 19-year-olds, some enlisted, a lot of them were drafted. The group that I was in were from Buffalo before they broke us up after basic. But most of us were from Buffalo. But it was a mixture of people, which again was a cultural shock because I had guys from the West Coast, which really blew my mind because they were all relaxed and hey man, you know. And then I had the guys from the South, the rednecks, and then I had the blacks from the South who didn't get along with the rednecks. And I had the guys from New York, I had guys from Michigan, I had guys from Florida. So it was a mixture, a cultural shock. I mean, it really is a hodgepodge of people
Yeah,
that
yeah.
you have to mush together, all different personalities, different cultures, so to speak. And you're looking around and go, what the hell am I doing? How am I going to get through this thing? But you do. And you do become a team. You do look out for each other. If anybody ever saw the character Sad Sack in the comic strips years ago, we had a guy from South Carolina that was exactly like Sad Sack. No matter what he did or how he tried to perform, something went wrong. I mean, to no fault of his own. I mean, he tried his best, but no matter what he did. So we used to call him, his nickname was Scooter, because he would just scoot around. We called him Scooter, and Drill Sergeant put him in charge of us, so that we would take care of him. We were going on parade for graduation, and Drill Sergeant didn't want anything to go wrong. So they gave us our gear and everything, and we had to wrap up our poncho, tie it up to our back, all nice square and everything like that. And I inspected it, my platoon leader inspected it, my first sergeant inspected it, drill sergeant inspected it. He says, okay, we're all good to go. We start marching, we go in front of the bandstand, and the thing starts to unravel. And he's walking, and this thing is like a tail over there. And we are just, besides ourselves. I mean, so there are some good times, into basic. You do what you make the best out of it. And if you went with the system, right or wrong, it made it bearable. But it's there for a purpose. If you realize to the point that they're doing something to help benefit you, you accept it and you go with the program. Just like in school, it's a curriculum that you're going through. This is what I want to be, but if I have to be this, I have to go through this. Internship for doctors, teachers have to go through student teaching before they come. Well, it's basically, basic is your student teaching before you go to the real world, before you become a soldier. So when you go from basic, then you go to advanced training. And I went to Fort Lewis, Washington for my advanced training, and it's a different mindset. So, because instead of being yelled at by your drill sergeants, your sergeants treat you with a little bit more respect because you've gone through this, the system, so to speak. So you had a little bit more freedom as far as going on leave. We could leave Saturdays, Sundays, come back Sunday night. Being in Fort Lewis, you had Seattle, you had Portland, Oregon that you could go into. British Columbia was sort of taboo because it was across the border, and you couldn't go because you were military and you were afraid that you would never come back. You're going to Canada. Yeah. But we used to sneak up over there just for the scenery and stuff, like take train trips up over there and come back. And gorgeous country. In fact, if things would change when I came back from Vietnam, I would still be in Seattle. I wouldn't be in Buffalo. I loved it that much over there. I had a nice situation where they had, on base, they would have churches coming in, different denominations, and they would take the GIs, or the trainees at that time, into their house for a weekend, and a religious retreat, which was nice. And it was also a way of getting off a base. It didn't count as your leave, it counted part of your training type of thing. So, I'll volunteer. Just to get off. I wasn't not really very religious, but I figured it's 2 days, get away, get some good cooking maybe, get away from the Army chow. So we go to this bus station and they got us all lined up again, and then they're calling out the names for the families. And they called out this one family, and the guy comes up, you work for Boeing. He says, you're going to have it great. He says, I've got 7 daughters. I figured I'd die of boredom. Heaven, 7 daughters. He says, but the bad news is they age from 2 to 12. But terrific family. They still, they wrote my parents after I left them, told how nice I was. They lied. And how nice it was to have him in, how respectful he was and everything. And they even wrote to my parents when I was in Vietnam, asking how I was. And I wrote to them every once in a while when I was over there, and they'd say, I heard from Tim, did you hear from Tim? He seems to be doing okay, handling up, but they kept in touch with each other for a while, which was very nice. And they eventually quit Boeing and bought a farm and went farm with his 7 girls and wife, and I haven't heard from him since. But it was something that kept you going when you were going through basic and through AIT, and even into Vietnam, you had someone else to talk to besides parents that kind of cared for you.
Sure. Describe the training a little bit in AIT. Now, you were doing combat infantry at that time?
Same, yeah, because now, after basic, that's where you get your MOS.
Right.
That's where they tell you what you're going to be for the rest of your military career, whether you're going to be in artillery, or you're going to be in mortars, or you're going to be logistics or whatever. Then they send you to the various posts for your specific training. Well, at that time, Fort Lewis was for military. So right then and there, after basic, you knew your next step was either going to be Germany or it's going to be Vietnam. And 9 times out of 10, your orders are going to read Vietnam, because it was in 69, 70. It was towards the end, but it wasn't towards the end yet. They still needed troops to go over there. But AIT is just an advancement of what it is, advanced infantry training, of what you had in basic, except it's more detailed. Instead of being shown what the weapon is, they show you how it works. You take it apart, you do more shooting with it, you do more field work than what you did. You do a little bit more camping, you do a little bit more survival training than what you had in basic. You're exposed to more weapons, because now you're infantry. So instead of the M14, you're also exposed to the hand grenade launcher, hand grenades, you're exposed to Colt 45s, you're exposed to a 45, M60. Every weapon that you can possibly fire, you're being introduced to, because once you're over there, you're going to be assigned one of those. But the fact that you can know how each one operates, how it reacts, and how you're going to react to it, the better situation it is. So it's more advanced training, it's a little bit more technical, you pay attention more, because if you don't, you realize something's going to happen, that you're going to screw yourself up or your buddy up.
Was any of it geared specifically for Vietnam?
No. It was perfectly, but not specifically. Fort Lewis wasn't really set up for a jungle. It was set up for World War II. So you had the forests, you had the bunkers and stuff, but nowhere near could they simulate of what it could be. You had a lot more classroom for Vietnam. But again, it was like the map I showed you, but nothing specific. Certain areas and stuff like that. And then you had the guys coming back that were training us, telling us of their experience, and none of it was fun experience. They told you the truth. It was hardcore stuff that they gave you of what to expect when you go over there. So, in a sense, yeah, but not really what you're going to expect when you're over there.
So they didn't have things like a mock Vietnamese village to go train in, or?
Well, it was sort of, but it was a makeshift type of thing. You had a hoochier, and then the guy would tell you what to look for, or none of this pop-up stuff, like you see on TV, where like NCIS, where they're going for their training, and you see these civilians popping up and stuff, and you got to pretend you're not going to shoot, or if you're going to shoot them, and get reevaluated. It's nothing like that. It's just a village, and you walk through, and they say this is the simulation of what it's going to be, but nobody comes out shooting at you. They just say this is this, and this is where they could hide stuff and stuff like that, but that was about it.
Did they take you into the mountains at all?
No.
Okay, so you're not using the part of the terrain that might actually have been useful while you wound up.
No, everything is flat. And understandably, because no one really knew what Vietnam was or how to train, because we're talking a different warfare. We're not talking basic warfare where you knew and saw everybody, and now you're seeing and hearing. You're not really seeing the enemy, you're hearing it more than you're seeing them. And so out into the mountains was more ambushes and more than confrontational than what World War II or Korea had at that time. Vietnam was a war with no boundaries. World War II, you went out to battle, regrouped, you went back behind the lines. There were no behind the lines in Vietnam, particularly if you were in the field. The back lines was your base, your home base, but even that was under attack. 9 times out of 10. Through mortars or artillery from the surrounding villages that of Vietnamese people that were there. So when you're out in the field, there were no borders. I mean, you had a firefight, you moved on. 50 meters, 100 meters, 200 meters, you moved on. And that was your next AO, that was your next operating area. So there were no cut lines and saying, okay, we're going to go here today, and after today we're coming back over here, we're going to rest, and then we're going to go up over there. It's a constant movement. You're constantly moving around. I used to tell people we used to go 1 click a day on an average. Sometimes on a good day we would go 2 clicks, which is equivalent to 1 or 2 miles. And you say, well, that doesn't seem hard. Well, you're in the jungle, and you're cutting away, you're going through brush, you're off trail, you're not on trail. You're climbing up mountains, so nothing's a straight line.
Right.
You're zigzagging all the way through. So from 6 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon, you're in constant movement, except for a break here and there or lunch. You know, you're breaking for lunch, that break down for 15 minutes, and then you're off moving again.
And so now, did the guys who were training you kind of tell you, didn't even tell you that's the kind of thing you might get into, or is that really more kind of peculiar to the situation you found when you got there?
No, they basically told us what to expect. You know, that it's constant movement, you know, what weather-wise, what to expect, how the enemy is supposedly thinking and stuff like that. So no, you can tell a person anything, you know, but it doesn't comprehend until you're there.
Right.
So it sort of prepares you, but you're still scared as hell.
Right. Okay. Now, when did you finish AIT?
I finished in December.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry, January. I finished in January. It gave me a 2-week leave. Went home in February, because it was the end of January, will be 5th, because you're going 6 months.
Have they given you time at Christmas at all, or?
Christmas was, no, I didn't get Christmas leave. We were Christmas over there, I remember that. And then I came home afterwards in January, and my birthday was in February, so I was leaving in middle of February, my birthday is at the end, so we had a small little birthday party to send me off. So coming home, it was for 2 weeks, knowing my next, I already had my orders after AIT, I knew I was going to Vietnam.
Right.
90% of us went. The other 10 were dispersed elsewhere to Germany or stateside, depending on what their MOS was at that time, or rearranged or whatever, for whatever reason. They picked out a head, I don't know. So coming home was a little mixed feelings. Driving into the airport was really strange, because my parents drove me, and no one talked. So we're listening to the radio, and Peter, Paul, and Mary is singing, "I'm leaving on a jet plane." How apropos. Going to the airport, and they're singing this song, and my mother just starts crying like crazy, you know. Hey, you know, it'd be okay.
All right.
So, but from the airport on to, I went to Fort Ord for process over to Vietnam, and that's a trip in itself. Within 24 hours, you're there and you're out. I mean, they assign you a bunk that you never sleep in. I mean, you're moving paperwork, everything, just going through processing, getting equipment. And I remember going into this big hall where we're sitting in bleachers, and they're telling us, you know, when the flight's going to be, what we're going to do to get our equipment, you know, being moved around on lines. And then on the other side, you see guys coming back from Vietnam, for the Marines in the other areas, and they're looking at you and they're laughing their asses off. It's like, we're back here going, you know. But the thing is that your tour starts the minute you get on a plane. So day one is on a plane, and everybody just wants to go, let's get this thing over with, for better or worse, and flying over. And the neat thing about it is when you're flying over to Vietnam, you start off with nice, good-looking stewardesses. Halfway through, you get middle-aged stewardesses. And then when you get to Vietnam, you get the old ones.
Did they have you stop in Hawaii, or?
We stopped in Hawaii on the way there. And then from Hawaii, we went to Vietnam. We had an hour layover in Hawaii. It was at night, so we didn't see anything. The airport's closed, so you can't enjoy anything. You're just sitting around in the airport, just waiting for the next flight to come up, and then you're out. You saw two sunsets, which is kind of neat. And then the first thing that hits you when you get off the plane is the heat and the humidity.
Where did you land in Vietnam?
I landed in Phu Bai.
Okay.
I was at the processing point there. And from there, again, it's the same thing. It's processing, paperwork, moving you around, trying to get you situated, and then that's where you get some of your training.
Did you land during the day or at night?
I landed during the day.
Okay, and was there anything going on when you landed, or was it quiet?
No, we had a military escort, Phantoms, taking us into Fubai. And we're looking out, and Captain saying, don't be too disturbed. He said, this is normal. And okay. And then you get off the plane, and then they put you in buses that have the screens on the windows and stuff, and they said this is normal because sometimes you'll get shot at or prevent explosives from shattering and stuff like that. So right away you know you're in deep stuff.
Yeah.
It's no longer fun. It's no more games. It's just the real thing that's happening to you right now. So that's when we start getting a little bit of in-country training, as they like to call it, and then they tell you about Hungaria, all kinds of diseases, mosquitoes, the leeches, and everything else that you're going to experience up over there. They try to teach you how to do field hygiene, how to keep yourself fairly clean when you're out into the field, brushing your teeth and all this other
stuff. Are they
stuff.
doing this at Fubai, or have they sent you up someplace else?
No, this is in Fubai.
Okay.
This is through the processing
All right.
in Fubai that they do this. And then from Fubai, then they send you to your unit.
So basically, do you get assigned your units when you're in Fubai? So they tell you. So you don't know before then where you're going.
Don't know where you're going to go. All you see is big map of Vietnam with all the various units.
Yeah.
First Cav, Big Red One, 3rd Infantry, and everything else. And then you see 101st Airborne, where it was all the way on the top. And so everybody's looking and saying, well, don't sell this too bad. We're trying to figure out where we're going to go, and then we look up and we don't want to go there. So I was one of 4 that got picked for 101st.
And in retrospect, of course, if you're up at Fubai, it might be a pretty good chance you wind up with 101st because it's all
Yes.
up there.
Yes, but a lot of guys went out to the other units went as well. And what I found later is where they needed you the most, where they had to fill in the spaces for the guys that either got discharged or killed or coming back home, whatever. So wherever the heavy fighting was or wherever they needed more personnel, that's where how they did it, I don't know if they put it down on a map or went alphabetically, no one knows. It's
Okay.
just one of the Army processes.
All right. So you get assigned to the 101st. Okay. What happens to you next?
Next, you go to your unit. You go on a big C-47, and you fly you out to. We went to.
You go to Camp Eagle or Evans?
We went to Camp Eagle. That's where our thing is.
Yeah. Well, it's the 101st.
I'm sorry, not Camp.
Evans
You're right.
is
Evans
the
is the base for the 101st, so that's where they flew us up
Okay.
into. And but I got helicoptered in from one of the outbases from Eagle Beach up into to Camp Evans on a chopper. There was only 2 of us there, and the only one that meets you when you get up over there is the Riley guy, the guy who's in charge of O'Reilly that used to be on MASH.
Okay.
He comes out with the clipboard, tells you where you're going to go, and he signs you up over there. And then you're all by yourself, waiting, sitting around, wondering until the top comes in and tells
Okay.
you what you're going to do.
Now, what specific unit were you assigned to?
I was assigned to the 101st, 2nd of the 506th. And didn't see anybody from them until I was going out to the field. I had a couple guys that came in from R&R. They helped scared you away, basically, as to what to take, what not to take, because they give you all kinds of stuff for your rucksack. And they said you can take anything you want as long as you can carry it. So they would tell you, well, you don't need this, you need this, you don't need this. So it's good in that way. So you're reducing your rucksack from 90 pounds to 50 pounds is basically what you're doing.
Do you remember any of the things that you either added or left behind at that point?
I left a lot of underwear behind, left a lot of socks behind, and left a lot of paraphernalia like books and stuff like that behind. Basically, they told you what you needed is a toothbrush, 1 pair of socks, no underwear because you'll get that into the field, which is a misnomer. You get that every 2 or 3 fill-ups. I left new fatigues because you don't take extra fatigues out into over there. And then basically your ammunition, your rifle. I had 2 bandoliers. And then some hand grenades that they gave you and to go out with in there. And when I went to Vietnam, I went with the idea that I'm never going to fire this weapon. At that time I was fearing, much I can get away from this. I don't believe in killing. I'm not going to do this and that. Well, the first day I got onto the field was a hot LZ, and I got fired on. And I'm thinking to myself, holy shit, they don't really care what I think about. And right from then and there, you start using your weapon from the first day on. At least I did, from when I came out into the field to meet my new group. They were under attack. We're flying in, and the guy's saying, it's hot. And I'm looking around, yeah, it is hot. It's 90 degrees outside. Speak of the obvious here. Not realizing that he meant hot LZ that we were going into. So there, as we're going in, rifles, you hear the mortars and everything else going around. What the hell's going on here? And dropped off in the LZ because the chopper's taking off right away. And I'm standing there, and next thing you know, a guy grabbing me, putting me down. I go, what the fuck, you crazy? You're going to get yourself killed. What? So it was an experience from day one.
Right. And what area were you in? Were you in the lowlands and the coast, or were you up in the hills?
Up in the hills,
okay.
Basically. That's where Camp Evans is. It's right up on the Quan Tri province, I-Corps.
Okay, but that's still fairly close to the coast. It's not in the mountains up farther west yet. You're kind of on the edge.
No, it's you got Way, you
Yeah.
got Camp Eagle, and then you got Camp Evans. There's no water around us. I mean, it's a 2-hour drive from Evans to Camp Eagle, going through Fubai, or through Way rather.
Yeah.
So no, it's strictly into the mountains. There's no, it's flat, but the mountains you can see
Right.
that you fly into.
Yeah, but I mean, there were some of the units of 2506 that were operating a lot in kind of the lowland
Yes.
areas immediately around
Right.
that. But in this case, was your company together? Or was it what were you joining the company or your own platoon?
Both.
Okay.
The company was out into that area. The platoon and the Alpha company that I was assigned to was up around the Ripcord area already at that time.
Okay.
But it wasn't Ripcord as we know it now.
Yeah.
It was in the beginning stages
Right.
where they tried to open it. And so we went in to meet them. And what was neat with our group is that they lined us up. And they wanted to know where we were from. And one guy from California, and one was from the Midwest, and I was from New York. Well, the guys that I went with Frank Marshall and Tiny and them, were from New York. So we could, New York, you're with us. So we had a small little group from New York, from Rochester, Watkins Glen, Buffalo, and Jersey, and Staten Island. So we had a little platoon or squad of us, but whoever from New York, so we used to call ourselves the Yankees. So that was kind of neat. So we all had something in common if we were from the same state.
And when you land in the hot LZ, somebody gets you down so you don't get shot. Now, did the firefight die down pretty quickly after you landed, or did it go on for a
It
while?
lasted for maybe another half hour or so.
Okay.
Because I got in as it was starting to end, not in the beginning. They were already under attack when I was going in. It didn't start at that time when I got in. It was in mids.
Right.
No foliage, and it was on top of a fire base. So I'm thinking, okay.
So did you just kind of lie low until it was over?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. I didn't know what the hell to do. I didn't know where the fire, where the sounds were coming from. And I heard this popping sound, and I kept looking around for what it was. And I asked the guy that was standing next to the guy that actually pulled me down. He says, "What's that popping sound?" He said, "You fucking cherry." He said, "That's an AK." Right away, you got to know what the sound of an AK was. Right then and there. So, and that's when after everything got done and settled down, that's when we got put into our various squads that we went to.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then this group of guys is basically now they kind of brought you in to join them, and now are they then trying to coach you and get you up to speed, or what do they do with you?
First thing they tell you is they'll fuck up. Listen. Listen to your. He introduced me to our squad leader, who was from Michigan, Carl Dykstra. He left before the shit hit the fan. So he got wounded before that. And I said, "This is who you listen to. You don't listen to him." I mean, he's crazy. He'll do things that you're not supposed to do. He'll tell you the right way.
Okay.
And if you listen and you respect your surroundings and you respect the enemy, you'll hopefully make it through. They do weed out the ones they feel aren't capable of surviving. They will call up to, or they did call up to the rear and say, "Kid's not going to make it. He's going to kill us before he killed himself." and they would move them out. Safety was utmost. When I first got there, it was sort of loose. For whatever reason, I don't know. I'm the cherry, I don't know, because of the CO we had at that time, I didn't really know. And because of being new, not really being introduced around, I just met him, say, here's your new guy, and fine, here, you're here, and that was it. From what I've read, it was a loose group. But once Hawkins came in, things straightened out. I was a little bit more disciplined. We were not given the more assignments where we wouldn't be a bother. We were actually going to be doing something, being meaningful, knowing that we could take care of the situation. I can't say enough about Hawkins. I really can't. I follow that man into hell and back. I'd go through that wall if he told me to.
But Hawkins doesn't get the company for several months
Correct.
after you get there. So let's
Right.
talk a little bit about those first weeks. So you go out, you join him out in the hills in the jungle there. How long did you stay out in the field that first time?
2 weeks.
Okay.
On an average, it was anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks. When I got there, it was towards the end of the monsoon, so it was still raining and stuff over there. And that's a weird experience because you're always wet. You're never dry unless we used to have our ponchos, and we used to make little hooches out of them to get us out of the rain. And when you buddied up with somebody, you took 2 ponchos and made a nice little big condo for yourself, out into the field to stay dry. But it was never a dry. It was always that wet, dry, it's in between being dry and wet, it's that real yucky feeling that you get all the time. And then by the time you really get dry, then you have to move out again and you get yourself wet all over again. So we always kept an extra pair of socks so that we could have dry feet all the time. And then we used to dry them off. We used to get these little heat tablets to warm up our sea ration. So we would get the little can out, put this thing in there, and we'd take our socks and dry them off and put them back in and keep them wet keep them dry again. So that was main important, keeping your feet dry out into the field, because it was always wet and always muddy. And so you learn how to survive that way, but it was fun and it wasn't fun and sometimes.
Now, in the rest of those 2 weeks, did you have much contact, or was it?
First 2 weeks, I think we had one contact after that when I went into the field. But it was a bad experience for me because I was still relatively new, and Tiny was our M60, and he made me his assistant gunner. And being an assistant gunner is you don't carry as much as the other guys because you got to carry more of the 60 rounds for them. So basically, when you're in a firefight, you lay down next to them just like you see in the movies, and you clip onto the 60 and you're holding on so he has an even belt going through so it doesn't jam up for him. No, this is at night. We get hit. And first thing we hear is our lieutenant saying, "Online." No, we're in the bush. And I'm thinking, gotta be kidding me. So we're online, and the next thing I hear is Tiny, "Let's go, man." And he's running. Now, Tiny is 6'6", at that time 250 pounds. Now, he's running, and what I'm jumping over, he's just striding over because he's so friggin' big. And here I am holding onto this little thing, and we're running, and he said, "Online charge." And I go, "What the fuck? We charge, you crazy?" And I'm trying to keep up with it, and I'm tripping up over everything. So that was my first experience.
So he's kind of just running forward, holding,
firing
the
he's
M60.
doing his John Whitney thing,
Okay.
and I'm holding onto this, trying to keep up with this big dude, but everybody's online going up after them and everything. So finally get down to a position where we're encountering the enemy and doing our thing, and then it stops, and we got a couple guys that got wounded that day. And this is where things got bad for me, is we had to get these guys out. And we were down on a hill, and we had to pick these guys up, put them in our ponchos, and drag them back up to the hill that we just climbed to get into the flatlands so that we can go to the LZ. Well, at that time, our CO decided he didn't want to use the same LZ we came off of. He wanted us to go to another LZ, which was a click away. Now, this is at night. You go a click away. So that at that time, later I found out that his reasoning was he didn't want the enemy know where we were. And I'm thinking now, I says, what the fuck? We just got dropped in. We just got hit. damn, they know where we are.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have been anything for us to secure the position, have the chopper come in, pick them up, and take them out, and then we can either stay there or go to the next LZ during that night. So we wrap them up in ponchos, and since I'm one of the newer guys, I was assigned to help carry this individual down to the next LZ at night. Now we're going through the jungle, we're trying to keep silent, but we're snapping things and we're bumping into stuff. And this guy has a leg wound and he's on morphine and he's yelling and screaming because every time we bump into something, it jars him, and his leg is all bandaged up and blood's coming out all over the place. And so they're trying to give him more morphine, and we can't give him too much because we'll kill him that way than we do anything else. So he's screaming and swearing, and we're going through and we're saying, yeah, they're not going to know where we are, right? So we get to the LZ, and we get him out, and we found out that he died on the way back to the rear. He died of shock and loss of blood. And we all felt that had we have done what we wanted to do, he would be alive today.
Now, was your platoon operating by itself at that point? Or
Yes.
were you, okay, so it's the platoon leader who made that particular pick. Okay. All right. And then X number of days after that,
We went to after that, we went into the rear for a couple of days, just for stand down. And what's nice when he's taken there, we still do guard duty. You have to do bunker duty when we go in. We're in the field, but we still got to do bunker duty for one day there to relieve the people that are in the rear that do it every day, so they can have their rest, So, but the strange thing is when you go to the rear, they take your weapon away. They put it in a locker. So you're walking around and you're still in harm's way, so to speak, because you're still getting mortared, from the NBA from there out over there. But you're not allowed to have your weapon for fear that you might shoot each other. It makes a lot of sense. But so every time we got attacked, we had to line up, go into the bunkers in front of this little storage area to get our weapons, so that we can go out to the bunkers and help fight.
Okay. Now, did the perimeter actually get attacked directly, or was it most just stray mortar rounds or rockets?
When I was there, stray mortar rounds more than anything else.
Okay.
But no, it was there for your own protection. I mean, you did get sniped at every once in a while on bunker duty, but for the most part, it wasn't a mad overrun because it was too big.
Right.
Camp Evans was a big base. It wasn't a small base because you not only had the 101st there, but you had 2 units of helicopters down over there, plus the motor pool and a PX and everything else down onto that area. So it was quite large.
Yeah.
So for it to be overrun or to be attacked, it would have to have been a massive assault to do anything worthwhile. So it was just hit and miss type of stuff, just aggravation stuff.
Yeah. Now, was there, like one of the standard assumptions with Vietnam is that a lot of the sort of the bad stuff went on in the rear areas in the camp, so whether it's drugs or racial tensions or things like that. And was there much of that going on, or did you notice much of it?
He did. I didn't notice that much of it. Some other guys said they did. The rear, when you came in, was to relieve a lot of stress and aggression. So some of the guys, would smoke up just to relieve the pressure and the tension, but never out into the field. Was never in the field. It was too much respect for each other to do that in the field because you could get yourself killed or someone else killed, and that was a no-no. That was always a no-no. But in the rear, where it really didn't matter that much, guys drank a little bit more than what they normally would, smoked a little bit more than what they normally would. There would be some racial tension, yes. I won't deny that. Either with music or culture. The blacks feeling that they shouldn't be there, and the whites same, but blacks always taking it to the extreme that racial and everything else prevented. They were the scapegoats. But it was there.
Yeah. And was there tension between the guys who were stationed on the base full time and the rest of you?
Yeah, there was some tension, particularly with the cooks and stuff like that, because when we would come in, we would demand, fresh eggs and stuff like that, and they always thought they had it hard because they had to get up at a certain time and do their cooking, for the rest of the base and stuff like that, so they felt they had their hard times and stuff. even though they would sleep in under hooches and when it rained and everything, it stayed nice and warm and dry where we weren't. But you know, they had the hardest job of it all. So.
Right. Okay. Now, so you're in for a couple of days, go back out again. Did you consistently kind of go back into the hills, or did you have?
No. Our aerial shifted into the area, into the hills, but it was always into the mountains, mountain ranges that we were in. Very seldom did we ever see anything flat. We were always climbing and going around and going on valleys and stuff and down. But no, 90% of the time we were always up into the hills and into the mountains. That was our AO.
All right. Now, your battalion is eventually going to get involved in an operation that was officially labeled Texas Star, based kind of around a base that took the name of Ripcord, and there were several efforts to actually establish that base before they actually managed to do it. And if I have it right, A Company was the one that was sent in first. All right, and that's like in late March, maybe, of '69. Before that happened, between your first patrol and the initial attempt to establish Ripcord, was there anything that kind of stands out in your memory in terms of what you did, or was it more of what
it was more of a routine.
Okay.
From day to day, you know, you got up, you patrolled, and you got hit, or you didn't get hit, you made it through the day, fine, you know, that type of thing. But they never really sent anything down saying you're going into a major operation, because I think if they did, they say, no, wait, where are we going, you know? But no, communication was to the fact that today we're going into this AO.
Yeah.
Not saying that it's a major thing, because we really didn't know it was going to be major until you actually get there, you know? That's what intelligence tells you.
Okay, when you're out in the field like this, we kind of go on and off of small fire bases here and there, or, and then from one place to another in helicopters.
Always in helicopters.
Yeah. What do you do at night when you're not on a fire base?
When you're not on fire base, you pull security. Each squad you have a squad inside a platoon. So we would have 4 squads inside of one platoon, squad 1, 2, and we would pull guard duty. And it would start just as it got dark, say around 6, 7 o'clock. And you would do 2 hours on. And then each one in your squad would relieve you and do another 2 hours. So the best duty would be the first one, because after that you got supposedly 8 hours of sleep, or as long as you could. And then if you had the last one, well, that's great, because now you're getting up anyway. You got 2 hours, you can do your meal, get yourself squared away for the day, and that would be it. And usually towards the end of the day, if nothing happened during the night, well, chances are nothing's going to happen then, you know. That time was in between when you had to wake up and then try and go back to sleep, particularly if you were the second last one. You know, that was really a bummer, because you're up for 2 and all of a sudden you're going to go to sleep for 2, and then you hear all their motions going on. And no, that's not a good one to have. So, but you would pull guard duty. You would dig trenches if you had to set up your nighttime positions. We would set out our field of fire. Each squad, we know where each one was, so we wouldn't counteract with each other or shoot each other up, so to speak. And set up our hooches, have our meals, and just try and relax for the night. And basically it was like being on a camping trip. You know, it was being a glorified Boy Scout at times, but not realizing what the consequences could be. But that was what it was every night. You would set up your defensive positions, trenches if you needed them, or bunkers to dig, depending on where you were, or if you could. And then getting everything squared away, and then silent control, you know, discipline. You know, I mean, you would whisper and stuff like that. And guys that smoke liked, you know, discipline and stuff, like cupping the hands and stuff like that. And that was basically it, you know, just get your meals set up and do your guard duty, and then pray that you didn't get hit at night.
Okay. And are you just living on C rations when you're doing this?
C rations. And that's where the weight comes in on the rucksacks, because you get one meal, you get a week's meal in a case, and there's 24 meals, and so you trade with each other for the good stuff and the bad stuff and stuff like that, and then you put it in your rucksack. So if you ever went shopping and you put cans into a bag and try and carry it, put that on your back, and that's basically what it is. And that's on and besides the other stuff that you carry, which is your ammunition, your weapons, your water. your ditty box where you would carry extra rounds for the 60 gunner. And this is what we used, the other infantry guys into there would have to carry at least 100 rounds of 60 ammo spare. Me being the assistant gunner, I carried close to 500 rounds. The gunner carried 500 rounds, and he would carry less because he had the 60, which weighed 25 pounds to begin with, plus his ammunition and his rations. So he didn't have to carry, and I didn't have to carry all that because we made up the weight difference of what we had to carry for it. And everybody never complained to carry more ammunition for the 60 gunner. No one ever complained. So they would get their little canteen thing that we would have, a pouch, and we would stuff the 100 rounds into there nice and clean, and we would clean them every single day because we did not want that sucker to jam. And not only our own ammunition, but the 60s ammunition we would clean every day.
Right. And how much water would you carry?
During the monsoons, not a hell of a lot, because water was everywhere. You know, you just stick your canteen up by a tree off the leaf, and there it is. You know, during the summer, as much as you can carry. I carried on an average of 10 to 12 quarts. Now they would give us a nice little 5-quart bladder, so I would fill that up with 5 quarts of water. I would have two 2-quart containers, so that made 9. And I would have 2 1-quart containers that I would put on my belt, my web belt, so that would make 10 or 12. So the 2 quarts would go on my rucksack to even out the weight with the bladder that I put on top of the rucksack, and then my 2 1 quarts up it there. And so guys would carry as much as they can, as much as they could clip on. So on an average, anywhere from 10 to 12 quarts of water.
Yeah, so you're talking 20 pounds or more at that point.
Just the water alone, let alone your sea rations to go with, and your ammunition that you had to carry. The hand grenades, the smoke grenades, your 2 bandoliers, your canteen for your cooking, your sea rations. So on average, 50 to 60 pounds. Walking through the jungle at night or during the day in the heat. And it's an ass kicker.
Yeah. All right. Now, do you remember anything about the initial attempt to set up Ripcord? Because you go in and wind up having to leave.
Not so much as that we had to do guard duty. A lot of times while the engineers were up, digging out the holes and stuff like that, the big bunkers and stuff, and just pulling general duty, going to their other support bases around, basically, and relieving other companies. We would be, I think in the beginning we were like 1 week on, and then 2 weeks off, 1 week on, 2 weeks off until they got it established. And I think either Bravo or Delta company became permanent up on Ripcord. Up until then, we all took turns.
I think Bravo was the one that was there when it shut down. I think they were up there the most. But,
Right.
but yours had gone in, I guess, at least in the official accounts and the book version and so forth, I guess you tried to land on one hill that didn't work. I mean, and do you remember trying to land and then leaving? Or?
Yeah, we got onto there, and then as soon as we got onto there, about half hour later, they came back in and got us out because the ship was just too heavy to get established up over there. So yeah, it was. I remember being down into the valley, and one of the other support troops on the base that we were going to be going up to were firing down at us, and we just see the tracers going over our head, and like friendlies, but we were being attacked at the same time. So it was a situation where you could respect that coming down to you, but you're also worried that you're going to get hit by your own people because it was that close.
But at this point, mostly for you, it's just you fly in, you fly out, you get shot at. It's just sort of another hill and another valley, another piece of jungle, and you don't really know what.
We don't really know where the area is or what we're in. We just know we're in this particular area. What significance each area has, we had no idea. That was never given to us. Maybe the platoon leaders or the CO knew, but us as being non-coms and just regular infantrymen, none of that was ever given to us until after the fact. In fact, I found out about Ripcord when I just went on the internet one time and just typed in Ripcord, and I see all the stuff coming up, and I go, "Holy shit, that was there!"
Yeah.
At that time, you realize you were into something, but you didn't realize what. That day that we were ahead, you realize something is happening. or so, that prepared us to get into that situation, but you never really knew about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then afterwards, when I saw all this stuff and I saw the book and everything, I says, holy cow,
Yeah.
you know, man, you know,
Okay.
I survived this.
All right. Talk a little bit about the sort of the leadership in the unit. Do you remember who your platoon leader was when you joined?
No. Names for me right now, if I saw the faces, I would recognize them.
Do you have
Give
a-
you the names, no.
How long was he your platoon leader?
At first, the first one, I think he was on his way out, so he only
Okay.
had the 1 or 2 months left.
Right.
And then the other one came in, I think it was Fisher or Fisa was our platoon leader. He got killed at Ripcord. I remember my platoon leader when I was after Ripcord, because I was his RTO, I remember him more. But being in a squad, you're not with the platoon leader as much as less, because he went from squad to squad.
Okay.
He wasn't assigned to one particular squad. He was in charge of the whole platoon.
And when you joined the platoon, about how many men do you think were in it?
At that time, we had maybe 12. The platoon size itself was maybe 60 to 65.
Okay.
Squad size, we were maybe 10 or 12.
All right. So you actually were there, about as close to full strength as a unit in Vietnam
No.
in that period got to be.
No. We were under
Yeah, you're under strength.
strength. Oh,
In
yeah.
terms of paper strength, but I mean
Yeah.
later on in the Ripcord campaign,
Right.
the platoons and squads get rather smaller than
Oh,
that.
yes, they did.
Yeah.
Platoon size was supposed to be anywhere from 120 to 150. We were only 70.
I think that's company size, probably, is that those numbers.
Company size, you're
Yeah,
correct,
yeah.
yes. Company
Okay,
size.
Okay. Oh, the company is 70, then a platoon is okay. That is small.
Right.
All right.
We were, company-wise, we were only 70 strong. We had 4 platoons at that time,
Mm-hmm.
or 3 platoons out in the rear. Echo Company, which was our recon group, was out in another area, so it was just 3 of us.
Mm-hmm.
3 platoons, 76 strong.
All right. This tape here. Okay, so at this point we have gotten you out. We're now going to be making in sort of late spring of 1970. You've got the Ripcord campaign going on, so late March, April, May, June of 1970. You're mostly moving around different areas in the hills, kind of north of the Aisha Valley, around where this base is. Periodically, you would rotate onto the base.
Right.
Okay. What was that like? How would you describe it?
Eerie. A lot of activity, a lot of openness, because it's high freed mountain. There's no shelter of any kind except for the bunkers that you have to go underneath. And we pulled guard duty, other kinds of duties that they would have us do, like burning shit from the latrines and stuff like that, which was always great duty. And basically, it was boring as hell. If you weren't part of the mixture, like the artillery guys, or with the
Command center, at the top, or the command center.
the command center. Basically, you were really doing nothing. You know, so it was very boring. It was nice to the fact that you didn't have to walk, but it was boring to the fact that you had nothing to do except rotate off of the bunkers for security reasons. Outside of that, very uneventful until you got mortared from other mountains or from the NBA. Other than that, boring as hell, hot, windy during the summertime. A lot of guys got blown around if you didn't hold on to stuff as you were walking. Worst thing was at night sleeping, because they had these little conduit things underneath the artillery. So we would sleep into there, and every time they would have a mission, they would fire the 105, and all the dirt and crap would come on top of you. So, and then it would just vibrate around you, you know. So it was a matter of, do I want to sleep outside or do I want to sleep underneath, you know? And if you slept outside, then you had the mosquitoes. If you slept underneath, you had that. So yeah, it was just choose which one you want, you know. So, but basically, going up and down on the base, we would do a little patrolling around into the area around maybe 100, 200 meters or outside of the wire for security reasons, and look for ammunition, bunkers, and stuff like that, and just trying to keep the area secure for the area. So,
Right.
but that's basically what it was. It was, sometimes you went out, sometimes you stayed on, and you rotated with the other squads.
Right. But most of the time, your company was actually out in the hills
Out
and
into the
camping out
hills.
there and going
Right.
around there. And in that period, kind of April, May, June, were you having much contact
Yes.
with the enemy?
I found out later, and it didn't seem much like the time, but between March and July 22nd, we had 32 firefights.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a hell of a lot within a 5-month span. That's almost like one a week or one every other week. So yeah, there was a lot of contact, some major, some minor, just hit and miss type of things. Irritating, we used to call them, where they would just shoot and then just run off.
Mm-hmm.
And by that time we brought the whole country in on them, but they weren't anybody to shoot at because they were gone already. Saw a lot of spider holes when we were going up on the trails. We had always on the alert. But yeah, it was a lot of contact in between then and the final day.
Okay. Now, at a certain point along the way, you have a change in company commanders.
Mm-hmm.
There had been a fellow named Burkhart who
Right.
was in charge.
He was when I first got there.
Yeah. And did you remember anything at all about him, or did you not see much of him?
I did not see much of him. Again, being one of the infantry guys and minor into the squad, you don't get to go with the higher echelon.
Right.
It's just his command post and the platoon leaders, and that was it. None of them really went around, or he didn't really go around, in my case, to each individual and talk with them. Hawkins was different.
Okay, talk a little about Hawkins.
Hawkins at first scared the shit out of me. He came from Delta Company, and I pictured him to be the John Wayne type. He had a presence of him, of confidence. And at that time, I thought it was overconfidence, that he wouldn't listen, and that we're going to go hell bent, and we're going to kill the gooks, and we're going to make a name for ourselves. And I said, oh shit, that's all we need. But it evened out. He took care of us. He tried not to put us in a position where we could not win. He told us what we were going to be going into sometimes. Obviously with Ripcord, no one knew what was going to happen or how it was going to happen. But I would like to consider him a soldier. He respected you, and in turn you gave him respect. With Burkhart, I thought it was the other way around. He demanded respect, but he didn't give much out. That was my feeling. Other people may have thought of him differently. Same thing with the way I feel about Hawkins. People may think of him differently. But as I stated before our interview, with Hawkins, right now, I go through hell and high water with him. And if he told me we're going to go through that wall, I wouldn't even question it. I respect him that much. And I, to this day, feel that he saved more than we lost by his command of the situation.
Right.
I was sort of in a position where I was in his command post during Ripcord when we were hit. We got broken up on that day, and I scoured on, and I saw him and a couple other guys. So I went into his position, but the command that he had was unbelievable. I mean, he was doing 5 different things at one time and not faltering on each one.
When he first took over the company, did he do anything to kind of make his mark or change the way the company did things?
Yeah, discipline. We were more conscious of what we were doing. We were made accountable of what we didn't do as far as security, securing our positions, discipline on into the field, on our patrols and stuff like that. I saw that difference right away. I saw a different attitude from a leader than I did from Burkhart. A caring attitude. That things are going to get done my way. And again, like I said, we would weed each other out, and he would not object whether he be an officer or a regular soldier, that if he felt wasn't capable or comparable to do what he wanted to accomplish, you wouldn't be there. So it gave us a little bit more pride in ourselves, knowing that he respected us, and therefore the people in the rear started respecting us more. Instead of being an L group, more of a shit tight group.
Right.
And I think that's what saved us.
Okay. And let's see. I think at a certain point in June, when the battalion has a stand down, they take you all back to Camp Eagle. What do you remember about that?
If you ever remember MASH, and you had General MacArthur going through, and everybody was getting all lined up and everything, and you just saw this guy driving by in his Jeep going through the camp, and everybody looking around. That's basically what happened. They brought in the whole battalion into Camp Evans, gave us new fatigues, new boots, new web gear. We showered, gave us haircuts, we had a warm meal, all done in half a day. Now you're talking battalion, going through a base in a whole day, shit showered and shaved. We get all set up and we're all standing in attention, and there's a helicopter flying by, and there's Westmoreland flying by.
Well, it's probably not Westmoreland anymore, because he was gone.
That's right.
So Abrams okay.
Was flying by. And after that, they dismissed us. We had to turn in our new web gear. We had to turn in our new fatigues. We had to turn in our new boots. 3 hours later, we're back out in the field with our old fatigues, our old underwear, and our old boots. They wouldn't even let us keep the new fatigues to go out into the field. So that's what I remember about that stand down.
All right. Okay. And then I think that was some of the other accounts may talk about getting, steaks and beer and things like that as part of that, or you had a party or something. Anyway, but you're back out in the field again, and now as June goes into July, around the 1st of July, that's when the bombardment kind of begins to gear up against the base itself.
Right.
And your own company gets hit bad finally about the 22nd or so of July.
Right.
But before that, what do you remember what was going on? What was your company doing?
We were doing a lot of recon. Prior to that day, our kids, Carlson Scout, we found a tel line out onto the trail, and we tapped into it, and they were communicating, and our kid, Carlson Scout, came in and interpreted to us. And if you can have a Vietnamese turn white, he turned white when he was listening to that. We found out, or he found out at that time, that they knew where we were. They knew about us, what we were doing into the area, the damage that we were doing into the area, because with all those firefights, we lost more, or we killed more than what we lost during that time. So we were making a name for ourselves, and we were kind of impressed that they even had us on this communication back and
Your
forth.
particular company or the battalion as a whole?
Both.
Okay.
Both. We were making very good inroads and doing a lot of disruption into that area, particularly on search and destroy missions. But we found out that there was 2 battalions out in that area. So the first thing he did when Hawkins came up and asked him what he says, Charlie Oscar. He said, Beaucoup NVA, beaucoup. And he said, well, how many? And he told him 2 battalions, and then Chuck turned white. So we reported that back, and that's when they decided to start thinking about putting us out because of the numbers of the NVA that were out into that area. Prior to getting hit, we were supposed to go to an LZ to be extracted, and which is what Hawkins wanted. But Harrison wanted us to go back to where we were.
And Harrison's the brigade commander.
Right. He wanted us to go back to where we were because he thought that would be the better position for us. But we just left that area. And rule of thumb is you never go back to the area you just left, because obvious reasons. You were there.
But did they keep you with the commo wire in one place for a while?
No.
Okay.
No. Once after that, I think we destroyed it. Cut off the communications and stuff like that, and then we moved on to our next position.
Right.
But what happened is that our radio got dead, so Hawkins couldn't go back to Lucas at that time and say, hey, I got a better place for us to go. So he had to make the decision, do I disobey orders and go where I feel where we should go, or do I obey orders and go where I feel we're going to be? He decided to go and obey orders. And as we were going through there, we could actually smell the enemy. They followed us up to where we were before, and we had to go back to where we were, knowing that they were still going to be there. At that time, we didn't know how many. We just knew they were there. So we were going back, and we were all talking to each other, and even Wilcox, or not Wilcox, I had trouble with that.
Yeah.
He was lead platoon going back into there, and he told Charlie Oscar that he could smell him out there. And even during that night, when we bunked down for the night, we were on high security. No sleeping, no nothing. We were full alert for the full night. We could hear them. We could hear the clinking, and we could smell them. We could hear the little buzzings and stuff. They weren't that far away. So we heard them. And then the next day, when light came up, we were supposed to leave around 1 in the afternoon, and that's when the shit hit the fan. And that's when the mortar started coming in, and everybody, all hell broke loose. It was on that day. A lot of it I remember, some of it I don't remember. It was a 6-hour battle. I remember the beginning, and I remember the end. I don't remember anything in between. It seemed like when I met up with Hawkins and his CP, we were starting to come back. And I'm thinking, shit, this is over with. And I look at my watch, and it's 6 o'clock at night. And this thing started at 1, and I go, holy shit, time flew by fast. And but the yelling and the screaming and everything was still going on. And then Hawkins, midway through the battle, I remember calling in and saying that he's going to bring a 250 right on top of us because we were that overrun. And so word started going around in very descriptive language about what we should be doing with our heads and everything.
You say 250, you mean like 250-pound bombs?
250-pound bomb came over. He put it right on top of us. And the other thing I remember on that was there was a loud noise. The ground shook. The tree shook. And then it was dead silence. I would say like for about a minute. It was just dead silence. You just heard everything just falling down around us. And then the crescendo started coming, and then the firing, the yelling, the screaming, and then it started up all over again. But by that time, after the bomb hit, it weakened their front lines, and then we started moving back to our normal position where we first were.
And by then you had at least one functional radio if he's able to call in. So.
Well, he had 3. The radio that went dead was the one that was connected to the
Battalion, okay.
Was connected to the battalion. We had back to the base, and for air support and for artillery support, that was still working.
Okay.
But the battalion, where we could get our orders and get the crap that we needed to help us, was dead. And it didn't get back on stream until towards the end of the battle.
Right.
By that time, Lucas found out that he didn't know what was going on all through this whole 6 hours because he had no communication with Chuck at that time. So we were in limbo, and it was all on Chuck to take charge instead of having battalion telling him what to do.
Okay. Were you still a machine gun loader at that
No,
point?
I was a rifleman at that time.
Okay.
The only thing I remember is when we got hit and all hell was breaking loose, I went down onto the knoll. I realized my weapon was hot and I had no magazine. And the guy next to me says, what the fuck? He says, where's your magazine? And I'm looking and it was gone because I already expended. I went to my bandolier and I had 5 missing. And I never realized it. And I also had my rucksack on. And you're talking 60 pounds, 70 pounds of rucksack. And when the shit hit the fan, we all just got up. And usually when you have this rucksack on, you're doing all kinds of motion trying to get yourself up because this thing is so friggin' heavy. We just started right off. Adrenaline just took over. And I didn't even realize I had the rucksack until I went down into that little knoll that we had where I met some other guys and they're looking at me and I never realized what happened in between there. And I finally took it off and I got another bandolier off of my rucksack that I had. So I had 3 bandoliers and those are like about 20 magazines each. And by the end of the battle, I think I maybe had about 5 or 6 left after that. But I had 5 missing that I never realized I used until that time.
All right. Now, how did you then wind up getting out of there? How does that action end for you?
We started, after the bomb hit, they started retreating some. And we started our platoons and other guys were starting to get together now. We're starting to form a front, and we started going up to the hill where we first got hit. And we're looking around, and there's not many of us. You have to realize there were 76 of us. The count was 14 dead, 56 wounded, and 6 of us came unscathed out of this battle. Now, out of the 56, there was maybe 14 that could still fire a weapon. They were hit, but not bad enough that we were in the arm or the leg that they could actually sit up and fire a weapon. So there was only 20 of us, including Hawkins. So we did a small little perimeter on the hill. And the toughest decision Hawkins had that day was to leave the more seriously wounded outside the perimeter, because there just wasn't enough room inside, because we couldn't spread out enough to cover everybody. So the noise, or not the noise, but the anguish, I would like to say, the crying and the moaning and of those guys out there, and not knowing you can't do anything for them. A lot of mind games. It really made us, really pissed us off that we couldn't help them. And so that was his toughest decision, was to leave them out there. And then calling in the gunships, the illumination rounds were coming in. We had puff planes coming on, dropping off these little parachute type flares so that they could get it out. And if it wasn't for the gunships and for the lighting and the artillery that we had 24 after that, I wouldn't be here. And we can't figure out why they didn't hit us. We were expecting another attack, and had they attacked us with just 20 of us, they would have done what they wanted to do, was to wipe us off the map, and they would have. We found out later, because that was always the question about why didn't they come. And then when Harrison went over and did his book and talked with his counterparts over there, he asked them, why didn't you finish us off? And it came through certain interpretations and stuff that we did so much damage that their leaders or their commanding officers were dead, and that they were so scattered they couldn't regroup, or they didn't regroup, and they just left, and only had like a small little squad or something left over there, and they were taking pot shots at us during the night, just harassment fire. But we found out that there was a battalion that hit us that day, and so it was like 6 to 1. There was over 600 to 700 NVA regulars, not BC, regulars that were against us that day, against 76 of us. And so that was scary after we heard that, but the fact that they didn't hit us, it was like, oh, thank God.
And so basically you're there overnight. Now, do you get some help in the morning then?
We get help in the morning. Delta Company was supposed to come in that same night, but the LZ that they were supposed to come in was on fire. So rather than risk putting them someplace else and then trying to come to us, they kept them back at Evans. So we were all by ourselves that night, except for the gunships that were on routine. They were 2 hours, and then they would come. Then another group would come in for us and just fly around. And if we got any kind of fire, then they would take care of what fire we had. So the next day, Delta Company comes in. They left at 7. I think they were saying 6 in the morning, and they got there about 45 minutes later, about a mile away from us. And they got hit as they were coming to us. And it got to the point where their back squad was being under fire, and they decided to leave them there and go with the other 3 squads and just go hell-bent, not worry about security, and just go on speed. And to get to us, because they didn't know what condition we were in. No one knew what condition we were in, because battalion still didn't know, except the fact that we got hit, or how many. And so as we're getting into there, the guy that I met, who was the point man at that time, said he couldn't believe how much dead bodies and carnage was around. He didn't expect us, and even Rawlson didn't even expect anybody to be alive when they got into our position, because of everything that was around, and all the trees and everything being scattered around, and the bodies and stuff. And there was those 20, sitting around waiting, and the other ones in the middle, all wounded and everything, just sitting there.
And were you able to get to any of the wounded who'd been left outside?
No,
Okay.
not till the next day.
Yeah, but then the next day, were some of them still there?
They were still there. My thing was, the 6 of us, we had to go collect the bodies and put them in body bags and load them up on the choppers. So we were one of the last ones to leave. But first foremost, getting the wounded,
Right.
the more severe ones that we can, first out. Those were the first ones out. The ones that were marginally wounded or but still in bad shape could wait until the next stream of choppers came in to get them out. And then after them was the bodies, and after the bodies, then it was the remaining of us. And Hawkins was the last one, just like in that movie. He was the last one off. But I'll tell you, if it wasn't for him and for what he did, we would have been wiped out. There would have been a lot more dead than what that were originally there. I mean, 14 is enough, but it could have been all of us, him included. But his command of the situation, the way he trained us out into the field, the respect that he had for us and for him, saved the day. And that's where part of that training comes from, because you respect your leaders instead of going against them. Give them the benefit of the doubt. And yeah, we had some that were goof-offs or that we didn't want. And we had a top first sergeant, master sergeant, back into the rear. He would screen the officers going out and the sergeants going out. And if it passed his muster, they went out to the field. But he would call us on the radio the next night and say, "How's he working? I think he's going to work out." Top, I don't think so. He would bring them back into the rear and get somebody else out for us.
All right. So you survive all of this, and you get back, and you're still physically in one piece. What then happens with you and your company after you get back?
They take us to Eagle Beach for a week, for a stand down, as we called it. We had our memorial. They lined up 14 boots, sets of boots, 14 rifles and helmets on top. We had our memorial, which is something I don't want to ever go through again. I still have hard times with Veterans Day memorials and stuff like that, because it just brings back too many bad memories. And just dead silence, and a lot of crying. I mean, big guys, just it was hard.
Yeah.
And it was even harder knowing that we were in the rear now, and we were supposed to try and enjoy ourselves. Well, after this memorial, we just went back to the barracks, and I think for 2 days nobody left. We just laid there, catch up on some sleep, because it was like 48 hours before we even had any kind of sleep during that battle. And even when we went back to the rear, we were still being processed and being debriefed, so we really didn't have any sleep. And those I could sleep was all fitful sleep. I mean, we just restlessness. You just couldn't. The adrenaline was still going. So we're back at Eagle Beach, and we're trying to come down and trying to have a good time, and you just can't. And then 2 days later, they take us to the rear. We get resupplied, and then the 20 of us that were still able to go were reassigned to different squads. I went back to platoon first squad with Lieutenant Taylor, and I was now the company RTO. So, like I said before interview, I was the old man of the group.
Right.
You know, and now they were starting to look up at me, looking down at other people,
Okay.
or looking up to other people, I should say.
Did they give you any training to be an RTO?
No, it's all on the job. Everything is on the job. I mean, if you can talk on the phone, you can talk as an RTO. The only thing you have to learn is the codes, the alphabet, in your position, and how to read a map better.
Right.
So, but that's about it. It's no different. You still carry a weapon. You still have to shoot it. You know, while your LT guy that's he's in charge of is talking in the back, and you're just protecting his ass in your own.
And then did you get a bunch of replacements coming in?
Yeah. Practically a brand new company came in, because you figure out of the 70, only 20 of us came back, so they replaced 60 some odd people, plus all the officers from Hawkins afterwards. After he took us out into the field, then they brought him back out, and then we had the new guy coming in, and then all new lieutenants, all new soldiers, except for the ones that were able to come back.
Did they give you any officers who actually had any combat experience? That they're all basically new.
All basically new. All
Alright.
West Pointers. Couple sergeants that were from other companies that they brought into our group, for some experience, definitely.
All right. Now, did they send you back out again into the same area as before?
Yes.
All right.
Right around the same area.
Okay. And now, was the situation different than it had been? Because Ripcord has been abandoned at this point, so they're not up there at the moment.
It was different to the fact that we didn't have as much contact
Mm-hmm.
as we had before, because now we're towards the end of the war.
Mm-hmm.
And they were putting us in positions where we wouldn't face any major contact anymore. They put us in what we called safe areas.
Mm-hmm.
We would do a little recon, a lot of walking. We got hit maybe once or twice during the last 6 months of my tour.
Mm-hmm.
But no, it was more secure areas that they put us in, only because they knew it was winding down and we were eventually going to all be leaving at that time. So yeah, it was a lot different than was the first 6 months of my tour, definitely.
All right. And so, how long then before you actually left Vietnam?
See, it was July. I got out of the field in January.
Okay, so you've got a number of months left still where you're
Oh, yeah.
leading these guys around. Now, later stages of your tour. Now, so you in the pictures and stuff that you have, you've got a bunch of things that, like from Eagle Beach and stuff, and some of them include bands from Philippines or Korea or
Right.
Taiwan or someplace like that. Describe a little bit the kind of stuff they try to provide to entertain or distract the troops when they're in these places.
It's a glorified camp. Even at Evans, we had troops coming in, or USO groups coming in and giving us and watching movies and stuff. But we would have an area where it'd just be under cloak, and there'd be movies that you can watch. You had a bar. You had a steam and cream that you can get your tensions relieved. And by steam and cream, I mean you can have a good time. The cream part, use your imagination. Bars. It was no longer, at least over there, it wasn't officer, NCO. It was everything combined.
Right.
It was cheap. You could get a bottle of beer for a nickel. You could get a shot in the beer for 50 cents. And as much as you wanted. And just generally chill out and relax. The beach was there. You could lay on the beach at night. It was fairly secure. So you didn't really have to worry about being attacked at night. It was one of the areas where you could just try and be a human being again and just relax. But you never could relax.
Right. Now, over the course of your time in Vietnam, much of the time you're out there in the field and you're mostly operating in areas that don't even have a civilian population in them. But when you're back in rear areas and the bases, there are civilians around. And how much did you see of them? Or
They would be walking around. The ones that were permanent in the rear would have what they would call hooch mates, and they would come in and clean out the hooches for them and stuff, and bring them their dinners and clean their boots and get their laundry done and stuff like that. They paid them, but they were around. They worked in the PXs. Sometimes they would work into the kitchen, cleaning up the pots and pans and stuff like that. They were employees of the government, so they were getting paid. But they were also sympathizers, a lot of them, and we could tell the way they were walking onto the base, marching off certain areas, and then that night, shells coming in close to where they were marking off, and then the next night, be even closer, So, it was a strange situation because they were there. Some of them liked us, others hated us. But there were a lot of sympathizers around, and you could tell how they would act towards you and the way they would walk around the base, looking around and stuff like that, a little sinister type of stuff. And you knew, and there wasn't anything much you could really do about it because you really couldn't prove anything. Coincidence, You're going to get out a population of Vietnamese and say, you're against us. No, prove it.
right. And how much did you see of the Vietnamese military?
Not much. We went on a couple bases where the Armans were. They were loose. There was a lot of beatings among officers on the non-coms for discipline reasons. Strangely enough, all the officials, the Vietnamese would never fly with a Vietnamese pilot. They would fly with an American pilot because supposedly we knew their country better than they did. They kept getting lost in helicopters. So for that, they liked us, at least the leaders did. But no, I didn't see that much of them. We didn't associate with a lot of the airmen. They had their own perimeter. Sometimes we would have joint operations, but few and far in between. Very few and far in between.
And then you also sometimes had a Kit Carson scout.
Yes.
Can you explain what that program was or how that was supposed to work?
Supposedly this was to work, they would send out pamphlets into the jungle, drop them off from the helicopters. And they would promise them so much money. They would send them to the States. They would Americanize them. And in turn, they would come back and give out their positions of the VC or the NVA, depending on where they were assigned. And their families would be sent to a compound to be protected, because what a lot of people don't realize is that the North Vietnamese would come into the villages and literally wipe out their own people, so that the guys or the men of the villages, young and old, would have to be into the army, because a lot of them were like us. You know, they didn't want to go out killing and being in the army. They like civilian life. So they would literally wipe out their families. And this did two things. One, it made them come into the service, and two, it made them hate us more, because they would say we're doing this because of the Americans, and that would be one of their propaganda things to put them against us. So they would offer them money, sanctuary, and all this other stuff, and then they would go out, be assigned to certain companies, and they would walk point, because they know to look out for the booby traps and all the snipers and stuff like that, and help us find the caches and stuff like that. So that was what the general program was, is to get them to come to our side. We would take care of their families, and then we would sort of take care of him, because he would be getting money, and he would be able to help us out in return.
And in your own experience, how well did it actually work?
Not too well. Not too well. There were from other companies that we would talk to that would put them into harm's way. They would deliberately put them into ambushes and stuff like that, and then go to the other side again, because that was what they did. Yeah. Our Kit Carson scout, I had mixed feelings with him. We still think that, well, we lost him in Ripcord. We don't know what he did, or where he went, if he got killed, or if he went to the other side because it was. But he acted a hell of a lot different after he tapped into that wire. For the weeks leading up to Ripcord, he was a completely different person. I wouldn't say he was scared. He was more alert than what he was. But he wasn't alert for us. He was alert for himself. And in a lot of cases, if they got caught and they were with us, then they could receive more of the punishment than what their families did, because they were considered traitors, which they were. So, but I didn't trust them. None of us really did. It was, again, political situation to help the people.
All right. Now, during the latter half of your time out in the field, sort of after Ripcord, are there particular incidents or events that kind of stand out in your memory?
No, it was just a routine, day in and day out, walking around one spot to another, keeping your head up, hope nothing happens. And like I said, they put us in two areas where there wasn't going to be a lot of contact, because the war was winding down at that time. And they didn't want to have any more casualties than what they had. And with Ripcord, as you know from your other interviews, wasn't really known until '85. And there was a blackout of the battle, because it was towards the end. And they were afraid that if it did work out, there would be more political unrest, both at home and on the campuses, because we were supposed to be going out, not going into a full-scale battle, which they put us into. Right.
Okay. So then, on some level, the big event for you is getting R&R after about 10 months.
After 10 months, I went to Australia for a week.
Okay. How describe that process? How do you wind up with R&R assignments, and how does that?
Well, everyone that's in the field gets 1 week recreation, either in country or out country. And they have different spots. You had Japan, you had Taiwan, you had Australia, and you had Hawaii. And Hawaii was set up mostly for the married guys, because that was the closest part where the families could come over, wives, children, if they had any, could reunite for 1 week, which didn't make sense to me because it would be harder after that 1 week to go back after seeing your family, just like the guys are now. Iraq and Iran coming home and then going back again, it's tough. But you had your spot, and it was all by in-country, time in country for the better spots. If you wanted to go to Taiwan or Japan or
Went to Bangkok.
Bangkok, yeah, those places
Hong Kong.
didn't make care of how long you were in. You could go there anytime you wanted to. But Australia, Japan was the other one where you had to have a little time in country to go to, because that's one of the bigger spots. But Australia was the pre for the single guys to go to, because it was nothing oriental like Bangkok, Taiwan, Japan. You didn't want to see any more orientals. So you wanted to go someplace that was fairly safe. And so I got 10 months in, and I went, signed up for Australia, went for my orders, got my orders, went down to the depot on base, where in Fubai, or Cameron Bay at this time, where we would go on commercial jets to go to the various places that we were be able to go to. But like I said, it was time and country, and my unique experience was that I bumped a colonel who had 8 to 9 months in country to my 10. And they had a good NCO who was in charge of dispatching us to the various areas and giving us our tickets and orders. And basically he told the colonel to go himself, because I had more time in country and he couldn't go. And he tried to pull rank, and rank didn't count in when it comes to R&R, particularly for the non-coms. So that was a good experience. But we did lose 3 guys coming back, because I think they went AWOL because they liked it so much. We lost a major, we lost an NCO, and we lost a non-com private over there. Whether they found them or not, I don't know, but it was kind of hilarious to have 3 guys missing go AWOL going into Australia.
Yeah. And what sort of attitude did the Australians have toward the American soldiers?
Super attitude. Obviously, they recognized you as being an American because you still had the short haircut and you were sunburned as all hell. And the clothes that you got, which was interesting, because you go into this depot and for $200, you can get a week's worth of wardrobe. You can get suits, you can get shirts, pants, socks, shoes, and then they give you half of it back when you leave as a security deposit, So you can tell, guys wear the coats and they're up their arms and stuff like that because they don't fit and stuff like that, So, but you can go out into the civilized world dressed instead of in fatigues. And but no, they were super. They would come around and talk to you and thank you and tell you where to go, where not to go, where to get action, where not to get action. What you wanted, where the best restaurants were. And I remember sitting in this one little mom and pop restaurant up on Queen Street, all by myself, and it was a young couple off to the side, and they're looking at me, and I'm at the jukebox and I'm playing all the American songs, from my era. And they come up to me and they gave me the obvious American. GI, come on. Took me over to the table. I had finished up my dinner with them, and they took me for a tour of the city in their car. His little Beetle that he had, and took me around into the city, showed me around the spots, to give me a sightseeing tour, dropped me back to my hotel, and wished me luck. I mean, that was the kind of people they were, and just a good place. I mean, there was no animosity towards us because they had their own people over there as well. They wanted to know what was going on. And what's interesting with the people of Australia is that their young men, when they go into the army or into any service, is 12 years. But out of the 12 years, 4 of it is school or 8 of it is school, and it counts as military time. So they have, if they want to go to school for whatever profession they want, they can get 4 years of college, 4 years of grad school, or how long it takes. And then the other 4 years or 3 years that's left, depending on theirs, is all active duty. But while they're in school, it's considered active duty. And they don't have to go into, like the reserves do, and go for training. Their training starts after school. And I say, hey, what a great country.
Right. All right. And then, so you go back, and then how much more time did you have to spend in the field then?
None. Because when I came back, our top, Neil only had 1 or 2 months left. So he got me a job as a driver for the commander of the base, or assistant commander of the base. So I had to go for a driver's test and learn how to drive stick, because I never drove stick before. I learned how to drive stick. And then I was on 24-hour call, so I didn't have any duty. I had to be in the barracks waiting for my boss or the lieutenant colonel who I was in charge of. And if he had to go into one of the villages outside of the camp, or to Hawaii or to Eagle Beach or whatever for business or whatever, I had to drive him. I had to be there for him. Even if it was on base, I had to be there for him if he went into the other. So that was my duty for the last 2 months. So Top took care of me after that, and he took care of a lot of us that were after Ripcord to get us as much time off the field doing other things to keep us out of there till we got de-roasted out of Vietnam. And strangely enough, going out of Vietnam, and a lot of people think I'm crazy, but when you first go to Vietnam, everybody is yelling and screaming, because the day you leave the States or you're on the plane is when your day starts in Vietnam. That's your time of duty, your time in country. So even if it takes you 2 days, you've got 2 days in country. It's part of your coming home time. When we were leaving, we go in through Cameron. I left out of Cameron. They get you in barracks, and all of a sudden you see a plane, shadow of a plane, and it's all silver. Big plane, you see it silver. And just as you're ready to depart, they put on spotlights, and this plane is all lit up, and the airfield is all lit up, and the guys are running for the plane because they don't want to get hit. They're figuring, hey, all these lights, you're still harm's away, you know, you don't want to get murdered, you know. So we're all running to the plane in order, but we're running to the plane. We get on, and sure enough, there's the stewardess, just like I told you, middle-aged, you know, towards the end of their career. As we're going closer, they're getting younger and younger. You know, so, but we get off, and we're all joking with each other and see some buddies and stuff like that. We're not, we're ready going home. We're going home. We made it. Thank God we made it. 5 minutes into the flight, dead silence. I mean, you could hear a pin drop. Stewardesses are going berserk. They don't know what the hell's happening. You know, they expect everybody to still be drinking and having a good time, and we're all just sitting there with our own thoughts. And it wasn't a dry eye on the plane. We all cried. And it wasn't crying to the point of we're going home. It was crying for the guys that are still there and crying for the guys that died there. And half hour into the flight, just like at Ripcord, the crescendo picked up. The laughter, the patter, you know, the joking around, your time of mourning, so to speak, went by, and it took like forever to get back. It just, the flight over was short, the flight coming back was long. And but once we hit the States, it was a different culture then for us.
Where did you land in the States?
We were supposed to land back in Fort Ord, but at that time they had the earthquake. So they diverted us to Fort Lewis, where I was originally stationed for AIT. So we went, in mid-flight they took us down to Alaska so we can get our orders changed before we went over. Now here we are in summer fatigues, because that's what they gave us, because we're supposed to go to California. Well, it's 20 degrees below zero in Alaska at the airport, and the plane is like 500 feet away from the terminal because it can't get close enough. So we had to debark, because we had to get on a different plane to go down to Lewis, because it didn't have enough gas to get, or whatever. So we're running in summer fatigues, low top shoes, into the airport, freezing our asses off. And then we had to go back outside, get onto the plane to go back in again, so to go to Fort Lewis. So from Lewis, or from Alaska, then we went to Guam. We stayed Guam for a changeover for refueling, and then we went to Lewis, where our orders were originally changed from and transferred over from Ward down over there, and we got de-roast out of there. So again, the same process, new fatigue, new everything, all within an hour and a half.
Now, when you at Fort Lewis, one of the things that they hear a lot is that they made a point of making everyone eat a steak dinner. Did they do that with you?
No.
Okay.
What happened for us, we were at night when we got back in. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning when we got in. By 4 o'clock, we were ready. All our paperwork was already reassigned. We got our new uniforms, our great A's, all our medals, everything else. And out we went. I was supposed to go to Fort Benning, Georgia for the rest of my tour.
Right.
As strangely enough, into administration because of my typing that I failed on. But I wanted to go to Benning to go down to DI school, and not to become a drill sergeant, but to be an assistant drill sergeant to teach the guys my experiences and stuff. Well, the war was bending down, and they didn't need as many soldiers, so they cut back on everything. So I was going to go into an administrative unit and do orders and do paperwork and stuff like that. I found out there was a job in Fort Lewis as an orator, where I would get the guys coming in from Vietnam and telling them what to expect, where to go, get them straightened out and stuff like that. Well, I was supposed to go for an interview, but the major that was in charge of the unit was on leave. This was on a Saturday. He wasn't supposed to come back until Monday. And I'm thinking, well, do I want to wait 2 days and hope that I get the job and get my orders changed, or do I want to go home? I went home. So at 5 o'clock, I went through SeaTac. 7 o'clock, I got on a plane and I went home. All the way from 2 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock in the morning, Western Coast time, to go home. That's how fast they process us out.
So at that point, you probably didn't run into any protesters in the airport?
I did.
You did?
There were protesters all over.
Okay.
My biggest one was on the flight home. It was a little old lady I had to sit next to. I was not old, obviously. At that time, she was in her 60s, mid-70s, early 70s. And I was in coach because I didn't want to go standby. I wanted to go home. I paid the extra to get guaranteed reserve flights. And I'm sitting next to her in my uniform. And she looks at me and she says, "Oh, Army." She said, "Were you one of the good guys that went to Germany? Or stateside?" I says, "No, I was in Vietnam." "Oh, one of those." She called the stewardess over and refused to sit next to me. She says, "Either you move him or you move me." They put her in first class. And I sat there all by myself all the way home. No one in the plane knew what to do. Stewardesses didn't know what to do with me because either they were ashamed or they were scared, one of the two. And none of the passengers came up to me. I said, sorry about this, she's an idiot or whatever, nothing. I was all by myself for the whole flight, all 4 hours going home.
Wow.
So yeah, I did experience some of that.
Okay. Now, what kind of reception did you get at home?
Tearful joys from my parents. Friends didn't know how to react to me. I didn't know how to react to them because I'd grown up so much. Everything that we used to do seemed very immature. I had a buddy that I went to school with. We took car trips together. He took me out first night back, showed me how you could pop wheels on his new car and everything. Went to a couple bars, and I haven't seen him since. It just did not seem relevant to me anymore. Or I had nothing in common with him anymore. I didn't have a lot of common with a lot of my friends. I shunned away from a lot of people, a lot of family too, because I wasn't sure how they would treat me or what I was going through, because I was still thinking of Vietnam when I came back in more ways than one.
Now, did you wind up having to serve out any more time in the service, or
No.
did they let you out after that?
I had inactive reserve for 4 years after, because it's a 6-year commitment when you get drafted. So I had 2 years active and 4 years inactive. They assigned me to a reserve unit, but I didn't have to report. It was inactive duty because I had combat experience. I could have gone if I wanted to, but at that time I said I had enough of it and I didn't want to do it. So I had 4 years inactive, so then I got discharged formally with an honorable discharge 4 years later.
But you were effectively done once you got back.
Effectively done when I got back, yeah.
All right. So what did you then go on and do?
I went back to my old job. I used to work in a shoe store as an acting assistant manager. My boss was nice enough, and he was in the military himself, that he held my job for me. So when I came back, he made me acting assistant manager. And then I stayed in retail for a while. Various companies in managerial places, but not really enjoying all the crap that was going on and stuff like that. Still thinking about Vietnam and stuff. And trying to keep an active social life. Went back to school because I had 2 months left, so I figured I might as well get my business degree.
Right.
But what happened was when I went back, my school got accredited. So instead of getting a certificate, I
Right.
got an associate's degree.
Right.
Also, the course that I was taking in business at that time was discontinued, and they put it into another group. So I got 2 associate's degrees. I got one for sales management, I got one for business or marketing management. So it worked out for me in that way. And then the other thing that worked out for me, or didn't work out for me, I met my wife in school. And 4 years later, she's still with me. And I met her the second or third week in school through my buddy's sister. And she saw me and she said, "Dad, how you doing?" You know, she said, "Rich is still talking about you," and stuff like that. And we've talked to each other off and on when I got home. He's my only true friend that I have that I can still talk to and about anything, and vice versa. Like I said, we grew up together. And so the sister introduced me to my wife. They were both in orientation together, and they just clicked together. So she says, "Deb, this is Susu, this is Deb." And history is what's going. This is. So I met her through there, and seriously, she's the best thing that's happened to me since I came home. And she's helped me through a lot of times.
And how long did it take before you could really talk very much about actually having been to Vietnam and the stuff that you went through?
30 years. I mean, I talked about it, but I didn't talk about it. It was to the point where some people would ask, and I would start talking, and then they would get the deer head look. I don't think I want to hear this, and then they would walk away while you're still talking. What helped me talk about it are my kids, because they were very interested in it and surprisingly proud of me, which I didn't think they would be, for whatever dumb reason, I don't know. And I'm in a PTSD program, but it took me up to 5 years ago to get into it. I knew something was wrong, but didn't want to admit that anything is wrong. It's like, I keep telling everybody, it's like being an alcoholic. You have to admit that you have a problem before you can get help. And at that time, my 3-year-old granddaughter was over for Christmas, and she was playing with a little cheap ornament that we had on the tree, and I yelled at her. For no reason. Just no reason. I just yelled at her and told her to stop it. And she looked scared. And she had a frightened look in her eye, and she was ready to cry. And I said to myself, "God damn it." I said, "I don't want her to think of me as a mean grandfather. I want her to think of me as a good grandfather." So the next week I got myself into a program. And I've been there ever since, and it's the best thing that I've ever did. Because now I'm with people that experienced the same thing, and I feel like I'm not alone anymore. Although I never was alone, but I never realized it. I had family support. I had some family that shied away from me because of being in Vietnam. Old Polish people that traditional ways. They wanted people to be in the military, but not the bad news that we got from Vietnam of being baby killers and dope addicts and stuff like that. No, they don't want any part of me. And that hurt me. And that's why I shied away from a lot of my other family, because I felt they would feel the same way. And it was just up until about maybe 10 years ago where I started reconnecting and realized how much time I lost. And I've got more support than I thought I ever have. And so that's when I started talking about it more, up to about 10 years ago, and 5 years of admitting that I really had a problem.
And have you observed a change in terms of how you think Vietnam veterans are perceived in society generally now?
We're starting to get our respect. We all still feel it's too late. Too little, too late. You know, where were you before? We were actually shunned, a lot of us were shunned by VFW posts, American Legion posts. In fact, I wanted to go to a post that my father belonged to. He was in World War II, he was a Marine in the Pacific. And he was everything into that post. I mean, he was vice president, he was a president, he was sergeant of arms, he was treasurer. I mean, he went up to the whole gip. And he says, "Tim, you gotta go down. Great group of guys." I says, "Well, yeah, I want to. You know, I'm part of you guys now." And I went down, made 8214 for him. Went to the guy, and he said, "Can't take you." I says, "Why?" I said, "I'm a veteran." He says, "No, you're not." He says, "You were in Vietnam?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "That wasn't a war." He said, "It was a conflict." He says, "Besides that, you guys lost the war. You don't belong with us." Well, I turned around and went home. The father says, "Did you get in?" I said, "No." I said, "They won't take me." And I explained to him what the guy said and everything. So he took me in the car, we went back to the post. Father knew the guy because he knew everybody in the post. And he says, "I hear you're not taking my son." I said, "Hey, Frank." That's my father's name. He says, "Frank, rules are rules. He's not a veteran. gotta be a veteran. You gotta be in a war. You gotta win a war. You can't have. I said, you're shitting me, right? He says, no. He says, that's the way it is, Rick. He says, sorry, kid or no kid, we can't bring him in. Father went up to his file. He had a cabinet over there. Went, took up his file, put it up, ripped it up in front of him. He says, hey, my kid, you don't have me anymore. I never felt so proud in my life. Went home. He says, forget those fuckers. He says, they're no longer my friends. And he never went back to the post since. So now I still keep getting stuff in the mail from the VFW who wanted me to join and stuff, and I just deep six it because I figure if they don't want me then, they're not going to want me now.
Yeah, of course, these days they're dominated by Vietnam veterans.
Right, because the other ones are dying off and they got to keep their ranks going.
Yeah, and different posts did different things, but,
Right.
but a lot of guys ran into exactly what you ran into.
Right.
Yeah. How do you think we treat veterans coming back now?
What's the question?
How do you think we're treating veterans coming back now? from Iraq
The
and
way they're
Afghanistan?
supposed to. I have a love and hate relationship with these guys. I love them for the fact that they're defending our country and making the sacrifices that we all have to make. I hate them for all the publicity they get. I mean, every day you see on the TV someone getting surprised at school or having cameras as they're walking off the plane with their family all around waving flags and stuff like that. I'm envious of them. I hate them for that, but I love them for what they do. And I'm seeing a lot more respect from them through us of what we went through, of the fact that no one will ever be treated that way again, or we'll never leave another one behind type of syndrome, to go back there again like that. And I'm seeing a lot more guys with the same problems that we had physically and mentally, that our government does not let them know what their benefits are. And hopefully I'm going to be retiring in about another 4 months, and I want to be more active into the VA situation where I'll be able to help these guys, and even Vietnam veterans. A lot of them still don't know what benefits they have because they're afraid to go back, or they don't want to go back because they're an anti-government establishment. And the way they were treated. When we were going to VA hospitals coming back for anything, it was just discontinued. I mean, it was just pushed off to the side. I went in feeling that I had PTSD, and they asked me if I drank, and I says, yeah. They asked me if I take drugs. I said, I take aspirin to get rid of some of the headaches and memories that I have. I said, sometimes I used to mix them. He says, well, that's your problem. Stop drinking, stop taking the aspirin as drugs, and you'll be okay. That was the treatment we got for PTSD. It was non-existent up until 15 years ago when the government started saying, yeah, there is a problem. And I'm also seeing them, I'm also pissed off at the way that some of the Vietnam veterans today are still being perceived, because every time there's an accident or some shooting, first thing they say, well, he's a Vietnam veteran. You know, that explains everything.
Somehow that matters.
That matters, and it explains everything. So we're still perceived in some cases as being druggies and killers and unstable, but a lot of good guys out there still making a living and contributing to this country.
Sure, you know, and that's what happens when men come back from wars, and it happened after World War II and still does. And on some level, at least one thing one can do about it is at least to share the story. And I'd like to close out this by thanking you for taking the time to do that today.
Appreciate your taking interest in it.